In this video, I'm going to be talking to Tom T. Moore. He is the author of Atlantis and Lemuria. His book is right here. And you're going to see his book. He's going to be talking about his book in the video. As you can see, taking notes. Tons of great information in this book. Highly recommend his book if you want to learn anything about Atlantis. Tons of information, a lot of details to Atlantis. I mean, he talks about the clothing, the cars, the transportation, the money system that they had, the dates of Atlantis, and he even talks about the destruction of Atlantis in this video that we're going to talk about. He is the author of The Gentle Way, author of First Contact. So he has written many books. And he talks about the location of Atlantis. So in his book, he talks about the crystal powers. So how Atlantis technology was very much based on crystals. The rise of Atlantis, the Atlantean moon, Poseidon. There's so much great information. The government, the military, the migration to Egypt. He even talks about this in the video as well, how the civilization of Atlantis, the people of Atlantis migrated to Egypt. He even talks about how he got that information. So it's pretty good. It's worth checking that part out as well. He even talks about Lemuria in this video and in his book. And he talks about Hawaii, how Lemuria is connected to Hawaii. In this video, he also discusses the evolution of mankind through Neanderthals, CRO-MAGNON, to the Adam and Eve model. So enjoy the video. I hope you enjoy it. Also, please don't forget to subscribe. And there's going to be more videos about Atlantis that's coming up. So please subscribe to my channel. Enjoy the video. All right. Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you for joining me on this video collaboration. This is one of my favorite subjects that I like to study on and learn about and get to know more information about Atlantis. So, and I read your book, and I'm a big fan of your book. Your book has so much good information, so much detailed information inside of your book, and I just had the need to reach out to you and talk to you more about this book and to tell the world more about this book, because you have a lot of great information inside of this book and a lot of details that's very mind-opening. And you're the author of The Gentle Way, and you're also the author of a book called First Contact that deals with I'm going to let you explain a little bit more about that one. You're getting downloads from an alien named Theos?
No, Theo is my own guardian angel, and Tura is a member of my soul group, or it's called a soul cluster.
Mm-hmm.
And so I communicate telepathically with him. I'm a self-trained telepath, and so I communicate regularly with Theo and Gaia, the soul of the earth. I mostly ask her questions about earth-related subjects, and then Antura, Theo introduced me to my soul brother, my brother on another planet, however you wish to describe him. And one day when I was asking about some ruins, and Theo said, "Well, you know, you're going to be able to see those one day." And I said, "Oh, how's that?" And he said, well, basically he told me I was going to get to ride in a spaceship one day, and he said this alien or this ET was tuning into me, and after I got over the shock, I always thought my conversations with my guardian angel were like private. I didn't know this was like like an open line where anyone that knew how to tune in could tune in. And I've since found out that I have a whole bunch of people tuning in all the time, other people on Earth that are able to do this, like to tune in to see what questions I'm asking in my uh, in these altered state meditations that I do, and then I've got these ETs and so on. So it's uh, I call them my what's the peanut gallery, like the old Howdy Doody series. So anyway, it's we probably need to go back and kind of explain to people, how this came about.
Yes.
If you'd like.
Yes. How did you get started? And I'm assuming the Gentle Way book came first, and then later on the Atlantis books.
Yes, and it all started back. I was reading an article by Robert Shapiro that was a channeled article in the Sedona Journal of Emergence, and he was channeling a being by the name of Zosh or Zoosh, depending on the way you pronounce it.
Okay.
And I call him Uncle Zosh because I've talked to him since then. And so he said one day, you can request benevolent outcomes in your life. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And up to that time, I had tried all sorts of modalities. Astrology, I did fairly good in astrology. It helped me be the first tour operator in Dallas to ever run a trip to the Super Bowl. 300 people. I booked the airline seats a year in advance. I also started recording my dreams in 1979. A couple of weeks later, I dreamed of an explosion and a woman and some men involved. My wife and I were scheduled to go to a World Congress of Travel Agents. We owned a tour company at that time, and so we decided to drop Manila, which is where we were supposed to be going, and add days to Taipei and Hong Kong. And the first day of the Congress, terrorists blew up a bomb at the front of the hall, injuring 10 travel agents, and that's where I would have been sitting. So after that, and as they arrested a woman and 4 men as the terrorists for the bombing. And then after that, I said, I'm going to record my dreams the rest of my life. Well, one of the nice things that recording your dreams does for you is that state that you're in when you're just waking up and you're able to recall that whole dream or portions of the dream or whatever, that's basically where I am when I ask these questions that people send to me from all over the world to ask it in this altered state meditation. And so then it progresses, and Robert Shapiro actually did a channeling for me, and he channeled a Indian shaman from the 1600s by the name of Reveals the Mysteries. And he's American Indian shaman. I know what tribe, but I can't say because it would cause the modern day shamans to be overloaded with people coming to him. Oh, channel this or channel this for me.
Right. That's understandable.
And so anyway, I asked Reveals the Mysteries. I said, is my soul contract to support Robert Shapiro's work? And Reveals the Mystery said, no, it's not. Well, I thought that was very strange. So a couple of years later, my wife and I decided to go to Improving Your Psychic Ability seminar. And this was in Sedona, put on by Dick Sutphen, S-U-T-P-H-E-N, a million-selling author. And the guy that that invented or called these great power points in Sedona vortexes. So he's responsible for 3 million visitors a year coming to Sedona. And he said they really probably should have paid him. but so we went there, and on the second day of the seminar, he was each day he was putting us under 3 or 4 times a day into this altered state. He's a great hypnotist, very and a really great voice, and he put us under supposedly to automatic automatic writing, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And instead I said, well, I think I'm going to try and contact Reveals the Mysteries. And so I said, Reveals the Mysteries, are you there? And he said, yes, I am, Tom. And I thought, wow, this is really neat. And so I asked him, I said, why am I the guy out here really pushing, requesting benevolent outcomes? And because the Sedona Journal was publishing articles that I'd written about it and all. And Reveals the Mystery said, Tom, he said, you're a shaman living at the same time as I am. Your name is Stillwater, and you decided to incarnate into the 20th and 21st centuries in order to reintroduce people to the gentle way.
Mm-hmm.
And I got the name of my first book the first time I ever spoke with Reveals the Mysteries. And much later, I was to find out that he's also a member of my soul group or cluster. And in this life, he's my main guide. Everyone has one main guide. Typically, it's part of your soul cluster. Your soul cluster is made up of between 6 and 12 fragments of your soul. We're all fragments. We're not whole souls.
Mm-hmm.
And so typically your main guide is going to be someone from your soul cluster. So he's my main guide. Plus I have guides for like a couple of guides for writing, a couple of guides because I'm in the film and TV program distribution business. I have a couple of guides for that. My deceased mother is a guide for all things feminine, because 75 or 80% of the people that subscribe to my weekly free newsletter are women. And so she somehow advises me on all things feminine. And and your guides come and go depending on what you're working on. If you change jobs, then or change careers,
mm-hmm.
Those guides will go away, and new guides will appear to assist you. And they do it out of love, and they do it out of learning, because they learn from these thousands of times that they act as a guide for someone to assist them. So this helps them grow too.
Okay.
So
Very interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of how it started, and as I went along, I talked to Reveals the Mysteries for a while, which was very interesting because he explained how hard their lives were. They did not have canoes at that time. They did not have horses at that time. They had to walk everywhere. He said, we have sturdy feet, is the way he called it. And in the winter, they were always hungry. So it was a pretty hard life. Most of them did not live past their 30s or early 40s.
Wow.
He and the chief of the Indian tribe both were up into their 50s or late 50s or so. So they had lasted longer. And one time when I contacted him, he said, I'm going to have to pass you over to Stillwater, which was me, which was strange talking to me back in the 1600s.
Right.
He said, my best friend, the chief of the Indian tribe, just died, and I'm in a grieving process for him. So it was interesting conversations that I used to have with him. So
interesting.
That continued on, and then I decided to try and contact Gaia, Soul of the Earth, and immediately contacted. So I've had tons of contacts. The soul of the moon, every planet and planetoid and sun and everywhere are all in soul. The soul of the moon says it's fine to call her Luna, but the soul of the sun, which it feels to me like I'm talking to a physicist, because of the way he. It's like being a son. You have to have sort of an interest in physics in a way, and I just felt like I was in over my head every time I talked to him. And he said to only call him son, because he said any other name that I could call him, a group of people that perhaps worship the sun would say, "Oh, see, that's us. That's who you should be worshiping, because that's the name that we call him." And so I only say son when I talk to him.
What got you started on the book for Atlantis? What drove you down that path? That
Yeah.
Was it
Sure.
a feeling or?
Well, not exactly. Keep in mind that here I was really into the gentle way, requesting most benevolent outcomes. And for those that are watching this for the first time and haven't heard about that, you could say I requested most benevolent outcome for my drive to work, my business meeting, the perfect house, the perfect home, the perfect mate, the perfect job. All of these types of things you can request benevolent outcomes for, and you say thank you at the end. And so, but I was the main guy pushing this, and I said one, and also Reveals the Mysteries had said I was reintroducing people to the gentle way. And so I thought, well, how long ago did this begin? Because 1600s, that's 350, 400 years ago. And so I thought, well, maybe it's 1,000 years old.
Right.
And so one day I asked Theo, I think it was Theo Gaia, how old was the gentle way? And I was told, oh, Tom, he said it dates all the way back to your days in Atlantis when you were inspired to create the gentle way. And this was about 12,700 years ago. So as I was to learn, I had about 1 million people requesting benevolent outcomes in their lives, most of them on the island of Poseidon, because at that time, this was long past the time when Atlantis broke apart and most of it sank 31,000 years ago. So that's sort of how it started. I have found out that everyone is a telepath. We all have this pineal gland in the back of our heads. Let's see if I can find it for you on this. That's the Rhine Institute, and here's the pineal gland, and it's everything in our brain typically has two of, but the pineal gland is the only one that's one of, and it acts as an antenna, and it receives everything that's telepathic, and this includes everything from channeling to gut feelings about someone to feeling, oh, I got to call Aunt Martha, something's wrong or whatever, and sure enough, they were thinking wanting you to call them, and you can go on and on. Everything that is a feeling or whatever, it's all received, these images. There are people that can receive psychic images and so on. This all comes through that pineal gland, and then there are other parts of your brain which I'm still exploring that actually interprets these according to your belief, your religious beliefs, according to your education, knowledge, learning, whatever you wish to call it. You receive these according to what you believe. So 10 people could ask the very same question and probably get 10 different answers. I get so many questions from people from, as I say, from all over the world to ask each week. Right now, what happens, and I'll show you, this is what I did this morning.
Wow.
If you can see this,
I can see it.
These were all questions that were sent in to me, and so it was like hour and 30 minutes this morning that I asked these questions. Typically after that, I lose my concentration. But people send in these questions. Right now, I put out this weekly newsletter that people can find at www.thegentlewaybook.com. And I have all my newsletters archived there all the way back to 2007. I put these out 52 weeks a year. And even at that rate, I put out a 12-page newsletter on Thursday. Every Thursday I send it out. And I still have 5 or 5.5 pages of questions that I couldn't even get to.
Wow.
That's how far behind I typically stay. And one of the reasons is if something really important comes up, like government shutdowns or once every 6 months, I do an update on the probability of Yellowstone erupting, and right now I think it's like 73 or 74% that it will erupt in between 2022 and 2027, and so I'm only asking for updates once every 6 months since we're still pretty far out from that time period. And also the West Coast is up to 63 or 4% for for earthquakes in that same time period. So we'll see. These are things that I'll typically move forward and put in the newsletter immediately, as compared to a question about, say, some individual or whatever that people ask me about their past lives, or of a recognizable person like Freddie Mercury was one recently, because of course the Bohemian Rhapsody movie, and
Gotcha.
I'll get questions about people like that.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I'm a subscriber to your newsletter, so I enjoy reading it. Tons of good information, and you have a mixture of information too, because it will deal with your alien contact, and like you said, Mother Gaia, and the past lives as well. So you have a mixture of information on your newsletter, and you have a lot of newsletters on your website. So
yeah. In fact, one lady, I thought it was very cute. I may have to use this line in the future. Just in the last couple of days, she wrote in to tell me. She said, "You're my otherworldly reporter." So, or news, news source, otherworldly news source.
Absolutely.
So I've asked thousands of questions, and people will say, "Oh, how do you know you're not speaking to some dark angel or spirit or something or that?" And I explained that when you're doing this, first of all, I surround myself with white light before I ever go into this alternate meditative state. And if you can imagine a bubble of white light completely surrounding you. And then also, if like Gaia or Theo or Antura or whoever they never tell me to do something. They only um, they say you've got to make decisions. That's what you're on Earth for. That's what everyone is on Earth for, is to make decisions and to learn how to make decisions, because that's one of our end goals that we don't have time to talk about, but our souls have an end goal, and this is why our souls volunteered for the Earth experiment. And it's so they never tell me to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And if they were, I was told, tell your readers that if anyone starts telling you to do something, run the other direction.
Gotcha.
And surround yourself with white light, because that's not in your best interest.
Right. Makes sense.
So that's one of the things. They just give me information. They said, we will answer any question for you, but you have to specifically ask the question. So as an example, when I discovered that I had had 185 or so lives on Atlantis, whether it had been the continent or Poseidia or Aran, those islands that existed until they destroyed themselves in a terrible, horrific war. They that's I had to ask specific questions about all these different time periods, and about when Atlantis sank, and when Poseidia and Aran went to war and destroyed themselves. All these different things had to be specific questions, and not just something, oh, just tell us all about it.
Right.
That thing.
Right.
We have to ask specific questions.
For the question, you mentioned the date, so that was that like you had to ask a specific question, and to where like, hey, when did Atlantis sink, and you had to wait for the response, or was that where the questions was, did Atlantis sink in this time frame, and you got like a
It all
question
depends
back?
on how I ask it. In the case of Atlantis, the first information that I kind of had on it was that I had a life, at 12,700, when things were starting to deteriorate, and I actually um, uh, incarnated at 12,700 years ago, and then I migrated with out of that 1 million people that were following and requesting benevolent outcomes. About 25,000 of them migrated with me when we decided that it was only going to get worse. In fact, I'd been told it was going to get worse. And so we migrated all the way to Egypt. And in Egypt, there was a princess, first of all, that was helping us settle. And this princess helped by saying, "Hey, we are a gentle people. We're not going to invade them like the Atlanteans had done many years before."
Right.
And so we just wanted peaceful existence. So that's then there was this Egyptian priest by the name of Rata. Now, people will recognize the name Rata because Edgar Casey had a past life,
Yes.
and he was Rata in a past life. And he had been banished, but called back to Egypt to deal with all these Atlanteans that were appearing. That was my group. And so I had to communicate with Rata and explain to him, convince him that we were not going to invade them like the Atlanteans had done in the past.
Right.
So, and that princess in that life is my wife in this life.
Really?
Yeah, and so and
That's
so
interesting.
yeah. Well, one of the things I found is that see, my sole interest or is religion, and so I've had lives at the start of every single major religion on earth, with the exception of two that are still coming up, and I know which two they are. In fact, one of the people that is going to start the religion has been. I'll just I'll give a very vague description. I don't want to get
Hmm.
too close, but they've been connected with the clergy in this life, and I've known them for a long time. But we're going to have another life together before this person starts uh, this religion, and in that life, I'm going to be either the mother or father. So we're going to have a very loving relationship with the person that's going to start this religion. So, and this is something that comes up. So, as an example, in my wife's next life, she's going to go all the way back to ancient Egypt, a
Okay.
little later than when we lived at that time period. And she's going to be he, and he's going to be um, a, um, a major leader for his people, and I'm going to be his assistant. But that life for me is already a past life. So I've already lived that one. I probably had that life shortly after the one where I uh, migrated with people to Egypt, and and by having been married, by the time it's over, we'll have been married over 50 years. Um, but by the time um, uh, this is over, we will have had a very close relationship for a long, long time. And it's my understanding that this happens before all of these religions get started. I am with them in another several lives, maybe one life, several
Wow.
lives before that life for them to begin the religion. Well, let's kind of go back here for
Yeah, yeah. Because we missed one of them.
uh, okay. Um, the case for telepathy, people have been trying to prove telepathy for a long time. The Ryan Institute, all the way back in the 1940s or so, was, and they're at Duke University, so give them credit.
Hmm.
They were running what are called ESP experiments. They would, as this slide shows, they would have someone set up, and they were using what are called the Zener cards. And it may be hard for some people to see, but it's squares and a zero and a plus sign and I think a wavy line and what have you. And they would uh, set these people across from each other, and they would try and send them what image they were looking at. The problem that and it was very inconsistent. They couldn't understand. Now the problem I think is that had they picked two people like an old married couple, okay,
Hmm.
or two twins, or in other words, people that really had a connection with each other and let them work together, they would graduate from the Zener cards all the way to receiving full sentences, paragraphs, what have you. And also they should put them into an altered state, let them get into that semi-dream state where it's easier for us to receive messages. Now when I do my uh, these active meditations, as I call them, um, I do it very early in the morning. I typically have done it starting somewhere around 4:30 or 5. This morning my dogs got me up at 3 something or other, and so I said, heck, I might as well go ahead and do this, and then go back to bed and go to sleep, which I did.
Hmm.
So I find for me, having absolutely no other thoughts going on, about what's coming up in the daytime, who I need to contact in my film business, or you know, or catching up on emails or whatever. It's that's the best time for me. And so I would love, if you recall, there was a twin that was on the space station for several months and a twin back at NASA. And I would love for them to have an experiment where they would have a twin on the Mars mission, and another twin back home, and that would have worked together on these Zener cards and then progressed and everything, and to test telepathy, because as they showed in, what was it called, Mars mission or whatever it was, where it's the movie I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the actor. And suddenly he was marooned on Mars, and the message was taking too long to get to the people on his ship, and they left without him.
I know what movie you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Matt Damon.
Matt Damon, right. And so that's a very good demonstration where had Matt Damon been in telepathic contact with someone on Earth or whatever, or even in the spaceship, they wouldn't have left without him. They would have stayed and wouldn't have gone through this whole process. Of course, that would ruin the movie, but it would possibly save someone's life.
Absolutely.
By having this instant contact. And they're going to find people will, scientists will learn eventually that this is instantaneous contact. And it doesn't matter whether they're across from each other at a table, or across campus, or across the world, or halfway across the universe. There is this energy path they have not discovered yet that will allow them to, and allow us to instantly communicate, because that's how many societies, alien ET type societies, are able to communicate telepathically. And we're going to have to kind of learn to do that. Can you imagine when we eventually get to stars? See, no one's thinking about this. This is
absolutely
too far out there for them to think of. But when we start traveling to the stars, and we eventually learn how to portal hop, which I can also uses an energy, and I don't know if that's the same as telepathy uses, or another energy. But when we start going to the stars and finding planets that perhaps are not as far along as we are much farther along than we are as our ET uncles and aunts, as I call them, we're going to have to figure out a way to communicate with them. And maybe they don't communicate with sound. We're going to have to figure out a way, and obviously I think there will be a need for telepaths on those missions when we eventually
absolutely
go on.
Absolutely. And it's very similar to some of the other books I've read, that it's telepathic communication.
Yeah.
Very similar.
So that's talking about the Atlantis and Lemuria book for just a second. Our ET uncles and aunts have, through millions of years, they're ahead of us millions of years technologically, but not spiritually. And so we have learned to live with negative energies that no other society in not only this universe, but the billions of other universes, 3 of which are adjoin our universe. None of them have been able to work with. They only work with the 10 positive energies, and there's 10 I just learned in the last year.
Okay.
And we live and have learned to live with 4 negative energies. So that's why we have all these UFOs that we see all the time. They're off of motherships that are masked so that they don't scare us to death. There's about 25 of these motherships that that are orbiting the Earth, and they're taking millions of readings every single day because we're the stars of our universe and all the other universes, because we learn to live with these 4 negative energies. And right now there are probably about 2 ships from other universes that are orbiting the Earth, and it's like parking is a problem. They don't allow any more than like a couple at a time. The rest of these ships are from our universe, and particularly from like the Pleiades and Sirius and so on. The real uncles and aunts that are our protectors, and eventually Earth will join the Federation of Planets in this quadrant of the galaxy. Excuse me. And there are around 200 plus planets in our quadrant that are members of this federation, but there are other federations in other parts of even this galaxy. One of the federations doesn't want to have anything to do with the others, so they're just kind of left alone to
do their own thing.
Yeah.
Interesting. And that's deals with a lot more of your information in your other book, First Contact.
Yeah,
it goes into more detail.
Although yes, it does.
That's my next book I'm going to read.
Okay. Although obviously, if as you read in the Atlantis and Lemuria book, there's a great connection between us and these Federation planets, because most of them provided DNA, parts of our DNA, for this Earth experiment. Because the creator of this universe said that to create a being that could withstand all these things on Earth as part of the Earth experiment. And so they went through a lot of different models.
I know. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And then you talk about the current model is called the Atom model. So I thought that was like, it was interesting. Like it was we're like a car, like a model.
Yeah, true. They started with early humans. These are considered humans. Littlefoot and Lucy. These were early ones, and then Neanderthals were. There were about 3.5 million Neanderthals, and Neanderthals had about 70% of our brain capacity. So they were very clever. They weren't up to our level, so to speak, but much more clever and they're starting to find tools and everything that they use. So they were more than people perhaps expected, just a caveman. They were cannibalistic, but that was their only drawback.
Yeah,
so
I saw that in your book.
Their numbers never got really large because they kept eating each other and bopping each other over the head. So they stayed around that 3.5 million part. And there's another picture of them. This is from a museum that's from their skeletal remains. And here's the difference between the CRO-MAGNON and the Neanderthal. So when the CRO-MAGNONs came along, keep in mind since they were testing out all these body types, they had the ability to nicely stop their reproduction. So in other words, it wasn't violent. They didn't just wipe them off the mat. They just somehow fixed it so that they could not reproduce, and so they just slowly died out, and that's how they did it. And so you had this Cro-Magnon man, and here was a reconstruction what they looked like. I think that the this is one of my favorite slides. I don't know who painted this, but this was well done, I thought. And who knows whether that's really right or not? But right. It looks. I mean, they look very human. Their only difference is that they had overextending eyebrows. And I think when they decided to eventually settle on the Homo sapien human, and by the way, there were 5 million of Cro-Magnons. When they decide on that, I think because of these overextending brow on their face, they were subject to having, if they got in a fight, they were subject to having this broken. And I'm sure a lot of that probably led to their deaths because they didn't know how to repair it, and so they kind of smoothed out that line. There were also some other internal things that they changed on the Homo sapien, and because we've never found a frozen Cro-Magnon, I don't think we haven't been able to see the difference between the insides of a human Homo sapien and a Cro-Magnon. But there were 5 million of them, and they have 100% of the same mental capacity that we do. So they were smart cookies, and would have probably been sort of almost the final had they not continued to tweak the final one to get to the Adam and Eve model, as it's called. Adam and Eve were introduced 60,000 years ago.
When we were talking about the Adam model, another thing that was very interesting was that they were able to punch in a sequence for the DNA to produce this model, and I thought that was interesting as well.
Yeah, they could make these bodies in 2.5 minutes.
Yeah,
that's popping them out really fast. And when they set down the Homo sapiens, they set them down. Now, you know, each they had different ET societies populating each continent, and so they were all set down just absolutely naked. And if they were in a place that was going to get cold, they would have to quickly find a way to clothe themselves. They obviously had to find quickly a way to feed themselves, fires, whatever. So all of that had to be quickly learned, and they knew where they came from. Excuse me, but they that was quickly lost within 2 or 3 generations because they were having, you know, who cares where I came from? I got to find my next meal, and I got to have shelter for the night.
Was it different ET groups that was involved, or was it one certain ET groups, and then which ones?
Yeah, they were different ET groups, and that's that's why you have red skin and black skin and brown skin. They all were created with little different DNA.
Which ET groups was it? The Pleiadians, Sirians, or is it a combination?
Well, the Pleiadians look. You know, one of the type of the Pleiadians looks just like us. Okay. But keep in mind the Pleiades. There are 10 major planets of the Pleiades, and there might be 10 or 25 or so different planets that could be occupied in the Pleiades alone,
Mm-hmm.
with different types. So they wouldn't look like human. They could look like, who knows? Well, I hesitate to guess, but bird beings or insect
Right.
beings or
Absolutely.
reptilians, whatever. So that's
Okay.
where do we go?
Let's go to the next. There we go. That's a good. This is going to be a good slide. It also answers a few questions too that from the group that I sent out some questions to. So this is going to
Oh,
be a
okay.
good one.
Right. Well, at the Atlantean continent itself existed. The northern point of the Atlantean continent did not go any farther up to the north than the 47th parallel, or the 47th latitude. And the southern end of it generally was at the 30th latitude. The tail of the continent extended down, encompassing the Bahamas.
Mm.
And 31,000 years ago, when this line of volcanoes that bisected the continent of Atlantis all exploded, erupted at the same time, because they were all sitting on the mid-Atlantic ridge. When they all exploded, the Bahamas were left, and Poseidon and Aaron I'd mentioned before, Canary Islands, Azores, Bermuda, those are all remnants of the continent. And when it sank 31,000 years ago, the oceans of the world, due to the displacement of all this land, the oceans rose 160 feet. And when they rose at 160 feet, every single village, town, and city located on the coast of all the world were were inundated, completely destroyed, and it destroyed almost all of the history of the world up to that time. There was just, 160 feet. Most of the major cities, as they are today, were located on
The coast.
on the coast of the oceans.
Absolutely.
So that's what happened for when Atlantis sank. So that only left. I've mentioned Edgar Casey before.
Yes, the sleeping prophet.
The sleeping prophet, yes. And Edgar Casey was one of the ones that started bringing up the fact that Atlantis was real. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people, most people think Atlantis is a myth, but it's not. It's just that all the records were wiped out when the oceans rose 160 feet. Now, the first shifting of the poles was 52,000 years ago. That's when many people froze to death up in the northern climates,
Right.
because they'd been warm up until that time. And Lemuria
Mm-hmm.
was, just to give a little preview, Lemuria was located near Japan, and it was about 12% larger than present-day Australia, and it extended all the way to within 100 miles of Hawaii. And for thousands of years, the Lemurians, or on the continent of Mu, as it was called,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
would vacation on the shores of Hawaii. And so people think, oh, there's this Lemurian energy of Hawaii, and yes, there is, but they think it's maybe from the Tahitians who came later to the Hawaiian Islands. But in actuality, it was from thousands of years of these Lemurians coming to vacation on the shores of Hawaii. And so that's why you have that energy that they imparted.
Right. That was their vacation destination.
Yes. and of course Hawaii. Keep in mind, um, there are times that the oceans rose. I mentioned the 160 feet, 12,500 years ago. I'm sorry, 31,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Then the oceans rose again 41 feet when Poseidon and Aaron and the accompanying islands destroyed themselves in a war. So that comes up to be 200 feet. And then when the Lemurians destroyed themselves with hydrogen type bombs, um, uh, that happened 7,500 years ago. The oceans rose again 170 feet. So you've
Wow.
got basically between 375 and 400 feet of ocean rise, which our scientists have confirmed, but since they don't have any information about how this happened, they said, oh well, the oceans must have gone up an inch every 100 years, because they didn't know that they had these three enormous events uh, totaling 370 to 400 feet.
Mm-hmm. I think even in your book, it talks about Noah's flood is connected. That's Noah's flood story is connected to the the risings of the ocean when those continents were destroyed.
No, well, when Poseidon and Aaron decided to destroy themselves,
Mm-hmm.
that the there were two basic religions at that time period. There was the law of one, that the people on Poseidon was the size of Cuba, except it was round as compared to elongated like Cuba is.
Okay.
And and then Aaron was a little bit larger than Hispaniola, but it also had five smaller islands below it, and uh, totaling another 14,000 or so square miles. So they were basically somewhere totaling mostly equal in land size between Poseidon and then Hispaniola. Aaron,
Mm-hmm.
and Aaron. Uh, those people uh, uh, worshiped the sun. They were called the sons of Belial, and
Okay.
so they really got into wars. Um, that's why I migrated with 25,000 people, because they were already it was getting worse, and I was actually told, um, and was actually flown in an ET ship to Egypt to scout out where we were going to live, and came back and then migrated with my group. And people continued to leave Poseidon and Aaron, going to the Yucatan, to Guatemala. You see all these temples and everything.
Mm-hmm.
The indigenous population was easy to control, so those people moved there too.
Mm-hmm.
And people kept moving away all the way to the last. And then Aaron sent its aircraft. Now keep in mind, these these societies were very advanced, because they'd been around for thousands and thousands of years. So they both had uh, the Lemurians and the Atlanteans had free energy given to them by the ETs, and
Mm-hmm.
who were appalled that they used these free energies to develop weapons of war.
Right.
And so the uh, Aaron, the leaders sent this 325 or so aircraft up in like a Pearl Harbor sneak attack, and proceeded to use laser type weapons to literally melt the ground that these people were on. 1.5 million people died the very first day of this horrific war,
Wow.
and uh, then uh, then the Poseidons retaliated, and eventually all the islands were wiped off the face of the map. And that was the time when Noah was built his ark, and it wasn't later in the Bible, it lists it much later, but keep in mind all these records were destroyed in all these different events.
Right.
And but Noah built his ark and did not have any wild animals. That was added to enhance the story later, but put all his domestic animals in the ark, and off he floated and landed on the lower slopes of Mount Ararat. So that's a true story. All four of the major religions of the world have that story, although in India they changed the name from Noah to Mount Manu, or Manu, M-A-N-U, in order to be more appealing to the Hindu people.
Gotcha. You had a map of Atlantis when before the destruction. Do you have also a map of Poseidon to give an idea to the people of how it looked like? And there we go.
Well, that's not it. That's
okay.
The Golden City in Poseidon. I thought I had it somewhere. Oh, there's.
Okay, that's Lemuria.
I'm missing it. Surely, there it is.
That's the one.
Yeah, that's where Poseidon and Aaron were located. Okay.
And Poseidon is the bigger section, and
yes, the rounder one.
And the other one's the islands at the south.
Yeah, and keep in mind this is an artist's conception, and it's it's a little off. So, but that was about their location. If you were to draw a line out directly from, say, north of Boston, straight out into the Atlantic Ocean, that's where you'd find Poseidon. And if you were to draw a line straight out from Washington, D.C., that's where you'd find Aaron. Some people have made a joke about the connection of Washington, D.C. and Aaron, but so.
It's funny how it works out. What are the coincidences of that happening?
Yeah. So anyway, that's we should give them enough for today. I'd like to remind everyone you can sign up for my weekly newsletter at go to www.thegentleWaybook.com. On the home page is a blue box, and you just click on that, sign up.
Yep, and I'm going to have links in the description for you as well.
Good.
Make it a little bit easier for them to click on the link to get to your website.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me today, and I look forward to